Dvorak. Kimberly, it begs the question, is there a war being prepped for in the Middle East that we don't know about?
Well, I read a story last year that we covered in here at One America in July, talking about all these weapons that have been making their way to these Middle East countries, our so-called allies in the region. And last week we learned that the Obama administration is now going to allow properly vetted, they say, countries to purchase armed Predator drones and Reaper drones, and of course, those are capable of killing a lot of people in a very, short time frame. And one has to question, why are we going to be giving Middle East countries our latest and greatest technology? And, what are we saying to our actual allies, one of which the UK is saying that they are extremely vulnerable to attack on their nuclear facilities by an unmanned aerial vehicle such as the Predator drone. And you're looking at something like that where they're saying that could cost tens of thousands of lives in their country. That came out over the weekend. So one has to question why we're selling this high-tech arsenal to a region that's already flooded with weapons.
Now, yeah, exactly. And maybe you can expand on that a little bit and put this in perspective, if you would, because we're not talking about sending or selling a few missiles to some country in South America to defend itself, or maybe a couple of F-22 Raptors to Canada, again, for national defense. You're talking about what we can only call a flood of weaponry going into one region, that would be the Middle East, correct?
Yeah, correct. We're selling them things like air surface to missiles. We're selling them Patriot missiles. We're selling them offensive and defensive weapons. We're selling Saudi Arabia in particular these high altitude refueling jets. And when I spoke with my source at DIA, I asked him outright what the $6.7 billion sale of these high-altitude planes would be used for. He said they're used for one thing. They're used to send bombers to an undisclosed location, and that each bomber and each plane requires 3 hits of fuel if they were to make it from, say, Israel over to Iran before they could come back safely. So in a lot of the defense intelligence communities out there, people are talking, we're doing nothing more but getting ready for some sort of war.
So what's the war? I mean, what are we looking at here? If we're arming our so-called allies, we're giving arms to Israel, of course, Saudi Arabia, our quote so-called ally, and other nations in the region. So where is this strictly, in your opinion, for self-defense, or is there something more nefarious building here that we don't know about?
Well, if this was just self-defense, we wouldn't be selling them offensive weapons. Right. So it's clearly not that. You can take it one of two ways. That Iran gets upset, they decide they're going to try to launch something against Israel, and so the United States wants to make sure that our allies are safe and can at least fight for themselves. The other scenario is that they want this whole Middle Eastern region to explode into a Sunni Shia standoff, and then they all kind of kill each other off, leaving one person to actually be the caliph.
But that would completely the region is destable enough as it is. That would completely destabilize the region and allow for another group like Islamic State to take over more territory, or maybe another radical Islamist group form and do even more damage, would it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to also, when you say something like that, let's remember now that even over the weekend, ISIS captured a lot more U.S. arsenal in Iraq as they went in and took over another military base in Iraq. They've proven capable of getting their hands on U.S. arsenals. So if we send more and more weapons over there, that's just going to provide more targets for them to get this weaponry. And we know they know how to use a lot of it. And what they don't know yet, they're actually finding a lot of people that they're recruiting to their cause. And it's almost kind of a Samson versus Goliath situation here.
But haven't we learned our lesson about sending weapons to this region of the world in particular? That these weapons, American-made, often end up shooting at us, our guys, our people, our assets?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you remember back in World War II, we had the barrage balloons that they used,
Yeah.
and those were put in the sky to help prevent from planes coming in too low and attacking air bases and whatnot in the U.S. as well as the U.K. And one has to believe that at some point these are stealthy weapons they're using. Are we going back to that day where that's how we're going to rely on defenses? Are we going to have to rely on something so prehistoric? Or are we, simply just flooding the region again to see if this is a Sunni Shia argument, and whoever wins out in the end, then we can go in and take over and I guess in essence, clean up the Middle East. But you have to think that all, the Middle East, whether they're Sunni or Shia, they are part of a religion that really doesn't like America and really, really doesn't like Israel. So at some point, when they sort out, their little war amongst themselves, they will turn those weapons on the West. And, as we saw in Libya, they're worried about, Italy's worried about them going forward in Italy as well.
That's my biggest fear,
Yeah.
is I know we hear that, of course, the Shia and the Sunni for centuries have not liked each other. It goes back almost to, I think it was a few years after Muhammad's death, but you're right. They have a common foe.
Yeah.
And the foe is us, and that's what we have to work.
Well, and just here to wrap it up, I think that if we're lucky, we're just going to see the lines redrawn in the Middle East. If not,
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky, and if
Right.
not, we're going to be seeing them on our soil at some point, as well as the West.
Then
And
the whole notion of them fighting a proxy war there is in my opinion, that's
Unmanageable.
insanity.
Insanity.
All right, Kimberly, thank
Thank you.
Coming up next.